Ethan rose to his feet, ready to address the crowd at the conference, when his eyes suddenly fell on his former friend, Barron, who was seated calmly in the front row. Suddenly, an idea sparked within him, a chance to strike back at the man who had caused him pain years ago. With a sly grin, he launched into his speech, targeting Barron, who sat quietly, unsuspecting of the storm that was brewing. "Let's talk about privilege," he said. "My friend over there," pointing to Barron, "grew up in wealth and riches. He had no struggles and never understood what it means to experience pain. He has no credentials in politics, yet media firms always reach out to him for interviews to hear what he has to say concerning a nation he knows nothing about." Laughter rippled through the audience while cameras captured Barron's reaction, his face a mask of calmness, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of anger. All because of his last name. Trump. Ethan continued. "Because a notable world leader bears the same name, people believe my friend is as smart as this international figure. Hell no, it's the opposite." The crowd chuckled. Some supported the boldness of Ethan's statement. Then, with an unexpected turn, the moderator prompted Barron for a response. The room held its breath. Barron, filled with a mix of humiliation and fury, stood up slowly, his gaze locked onto Ethan's. A charged silence enveloped the audience as speculation ran wild. Would he retaliate? Would he explode with rage? The tension was palpable, but instead of something bold, Barron took a deep breath, leaving everyone guessing about his next move. The moderator hesitates, unsure of whether to intervene or not. To everyone's surprise, Barron stood up and walked over to the podium. Barron, feeling humiliated, looked Ethan right in the face. But what happened next wasn't what everyone expected. Who would believe the level of damage bitterness and rivalry can cause between two friends? The hatred and spite were the height of it. That was the case for Ethan Calloway and Barron Trump, two best friends who grew up almost like twins. But how did the two best friends fall out to become the worst enemies? Chapter 1. A Childhood of Adventure. Before their rivalry journey, Ethan and Barron were inseparable. Theirs was a bond scripted into the universe before they took their first breaths. Their mothers, Eleanor Calloway and Melania Trump, met as college freshmen at NYC University, two ambitious young women from vastly different backgrounds. Eleanor was the daughter of a businessman, and Eleanor's parents were into political affairs. Despite their differences, they became close friends, having late-night study sessions and sharing dreams of the future. After school, they settled down with their respective husbands while maintaining proximity by staying in the same neighborhood and their houses right across from each other. By pure coincidence, they became pregnant around the same period and gave birth on the same day. Ethan and Barron were born in the same hospital, just some hours apart, making Barron come out before Ethan. They could pass out to be twins from different mothers. Barron has good genes and looks like a prince taken right out of a Disney movie. However, Ethan looked like the villain in these movies. The two boys grew up together as their mothers made it their duty to make sure they raised them side by side. Richard Calloway, Ethan's father, is immersed in media and runs a broadcast firm, a publication known for its sharp political coverage, while Donald Trump, Barron's father, is strictly into business and politics. However, the friendship between their mothers ensured they grew up practically as brothers in everything but blood. When they turned 14, their parents enrolled them in an academy, an elite private school that recruited only the children of business moguls, politicians, and celebrities. It was here they started to cross paths with other children in their age group, and Barron, the quiet but self-assured kid, seemed to attract attention to himself effortlessly, unlike Ethan, who thrived on arguments and debates. Ethan had a talent for turning the classroom into a battleground, queerly questioning teachers, outsmarting his peers, and ensuring every discussion he engaged in ended up with him trying to prove someone wrong. Soon enough, everyone noticed his unruly behaviors, and they started to avoid him. By junior year, Barron School Football Academy was struggling. Their star player and captain had graduated, and the team lacked leadership. The school needed a captain, but no one would step up. But one afternoon, while Barron was seated in the field watching them practice, their coach walked up to him and said, "You've been sitting and watching us play for 2 years. I see you watch every game. I see you analyze defenses before they move. You're smarter than half the guys out there. So tell me why you're not on my team." Barron just shrugged and said, "Maybe because I am not meant to be a football player." The coach took that, but not without further telling him how good of a player he would make if he'd give it a try. Now Barron was skeptical. He didn't want to join something that would show him off and was not interested in being popular. But sometimes it's not about wanting the role. It is about stepping up when no one else would. And if there is one thing Barron believed in, it is taking control when it matters the most. Barron joined the football team at his school, and training began in earnest. Many of the players assumed he wouldn't be able to pull it off and that he was just another handsome kid who wanted attention. Some doubted he had the guts and toughness for football, but Barron did not argue or respond to their taunts. He just worked. He trained harder than anyone else. He mastered every technique, rehearsed every training, and perfected his throws until his passes were awesomely accurate. And by the time the season had started, it was clear that Barron was the best player the school football academy had ever seen. The state had a championship coming up, and Barron's school had made it past the locals to the state championship, facing their biggest rival, Westwood High. The game was brutal, and by the fourth quarter the score was tied. The defense was exhausted and the pressure was crushing. Then, with less than a minute left, Barron stepped onto the pitch and did something unexpected. He changed the narrative. It was a high-risk move, one that hasn't been practiced. But Barron has been watching Westwood High's defense all along, and he knew what was expected. As the ball was passed, the defense charged in, thinking they had him cornered. But Barron had already anticipated this would happen. He dribbled with all the skills he had and launched a perfect spiral down the field into the goalpost. It was a touchdown, and Barron scored the last goal before the whistle blew, making his school win the championship for the year. The crowd, who had long been holding their breaths while Barron made his way to the goalpost, now erupted in screams. The team lifted Barron onto their shoulders and sang his praise. They all knew it was not an easy score. Most of the players had been training for years, but they could not make that hit. The game was over, and Barron was back in school. When the season to vote for the football team's captain came around, without argument or further ado, Barron was made the captain of his football team because he earned it. His fame spread like wildfire around his school and in other schools. But where was his best friend all this time? In their school, football was not just a sport but a legacy. Over time, the school team produced college stars and even a few NFL players, and being a part of it commands instant respect and popularity. Ethan was not into sports. He preferred to be on the media team of his school, which was not surprising because it ran in his veins. He has spent years dominating the media team, but deep down, he wanted more. He wanted recognition beyond words. Barron, on the other hand, never intentionally sought the spotlight. While other students craved it as though their lives depended on it, Barron preferred to stay in the shadows, observing and cheering others on. He has spent most of his childhood avoiding the expectations that came with his last name, choosing to find his part and excel in his way through quiet intelligence, careful strategy, and a natural ability to stay 10 steps ahead. Although the sport was not a priority for him before now, he analyzed plays in his head and understood the dynamics of football better than most of his team members, and they could all see how it just flowed naturally in him. Chapter 2. The Big Confession. By senior year, Ethan Calloway, on the other hand, had gotten everything he thought he wanted. He is the best debater in the entire school, the director of the school media team, and the most influential voice in any room he steps into. He had fought his way to the top and stood above the rest. But there was one thing he was yet to claim and get hold of, and that was Sophia Carter, the girl he had had a big crush on since junior year. Many girls have shown interest in Ethan. Some even went as far as leaving notes in his locker and buying him lunch and gifts. But Ethan had always had his eyes only on Sophia, and nothing could change that. Sophia came from a family of academicians and had always been intellectually curious. She wasn't that book smart, but she understood people, emotions, and the unspoken tension that hung in the air between them. She could win a debate without raising her voice, disarming any argument with a single well-placed question. She could speak in a room full of well-off people without ever losing her composure, and they listened when she spoke. Ethan has always admired her power, intelligence, and ambition, because these are qualities he sees in himself. But with Sophia, it was different, as she didn't need to strive for control the way he did, and she didn't need to constantly prove herself before she was accepted. Ethan loved her, not because of all these qualities, but because she was the type of girl who would own her opinion in any conversation, and she had never been intimidated by his sharp wit or competitive nature. She was one of the people who could challenge him without it turning into a fight. She could meet him word for word and thought for thought. Sophia challenged him. She was not afraid to call him to order when he was arrogant, but she also saw the good in him, his drive, brilliance, and his hunger to always be the best. For a year now, he had been looking for the right moment to tell her how he felt about her. He had rehearsed the conversation in his head, picturing how she would smile and accept him by saying, "What took you so long?" Finally, the moment he had long been waiting for finally arrived. They were both assigned the same duties that morning, at the school field. As Sophia Carter was walking beside him, Ethan suddenly felt small because, for the first time in his life, this conversation he was about to have was something her could not control or predict what the outcome would be. He had never been this nervous. He, however, had to muster all the courage left in him because if there was one thing Ethan hated more than losing, it was regret. He took a deep breath and forced himself to speak. "I think I like you, Sophia," he said abruptly. His voice sounded steady and strong, but underneath it there was something rare and unfamiliar. Vulnerability. His feelings for Sophia have made him vulnerable to her, and he was at the mercy of her response. He hated this more than anything, but it was what had to be done. Sophia stopped walking and turned to face him. She didn't say anything, or give any expression or reaction that showed if she was in the slightest interest in Ethan. She just stood there motionless as if she was critically thinking of how to respond to what he had just said. That silence almost took his life, as he didn't know what to expect or what would come after. Ethan sighed hard and kept going, pushing through the heavy lump that had now formed in his chest. "I just think we will be good together." His voice is quieter now. "I know you. I know how you think and what you want. And I think." He exhaled and sharply forced the words out before he lost his nerves. "I think I could make you happy, and we'd be the school power couple if you gave me a chance." Sophia moved her lips as if she was able to say something, but then she hesitated. Ethan was now thinking about what could be going on in her head. He had expected a lot of things, but not this reaction he was getting right now. The look in her eyes said a lot, and Ethan could tell by now that he was assuredly getting rejected. She finally sighed softly, as if she wished she didn't have to say what she was about to say. "Ethan," she began, her voice gentle and careful, "I think you are a very amazing person. You know I think of you this way," but Ethan screamed inside his head. There wasn't supposed to be a but. Oh my, what would follow, he thought. Her gaze didn't waver when she spoke, and her voice was firm, stating that it was her decision and that she wasn't going back on it. "I have feelings for someone else," she continued. The words reached Ethan's ears, and he felt like he had just been shot directly in the head, and the world seemed to stop at that very moment. Everything suddenly faded into a low, dull hum. He could feel his heart pounding rapidly. For a second he thought maybe he had misheard her, but then, with the same softness in her voice and that same hesitation, she went on to say, "I am in love with Barron." Ethan's blood suddenly ran cold in his veins, and tears welled up in his eyes. He was looking directly at the floor, but when he heard her mention Barron's name, he raised his head and looked at her with his red eye, giving her a bloodshot stare. "I know this is messed up. He is your best friend, and I don't want to be the one to come between your friendship. But he is the one my heart loves," she continued to say. But Ethan just stared at her, saying nothing. He had always prided himself on his ability to stay composed no matter the situation, to never show weakness or cry, and to always be in control. But right now, He felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt powerless. He forced himself to stay calm and to keep his expression unreadable. He was able to later ask why. His voice was tight. "Why him?" he asked again. Her voice drifted as she looked away briefly and then met his gaze again. "Because he is different," she said. "He does not try to impress me. He does not treat everything like a competition. He just sees me for who I am." Ethan clenched his jaw. "That's because he's not even trying to get you," he said. Sophia just gave a small, knowing smile. "Maybe that's why it works. Maybe that's what makes it even more interesting," she replied. Something in Ethan suddenly snapped. And this time, it wasn't about Sophia anymore. This was about Barron. He had never competed for anything. He had never fought for respect. He never had to prove himself, and he never wanted to be the best either. And yet, here he was winning anyway. Yeah, great, he thought. Out of all the people she could have chosen, it just had to be him. He told Sophia that Barron would never agree to go out with you. "He knows how much I like you, and he would not want to be together with someone who rejected his best friend." Sophia just smiled and said calmly, "That's not in your place to say. The heart gets what the heart wants." And with that, she just turned and left Ethan standing there. Chapter 3. The beginning of the rivalry. Sophia was inspired to join cheerleading for the football team during their junior year, but Barron hadn't joined the football team by then. When he later joined in their senior year, she noticed how he had a way of bringing people together and pushing them to be better individuals. She worked hard to make the cheerleading squad more than just a group that hyped the players. They were a team just like the football players. They trained together, pushed their limit, and took their roles seriously. An opportunity presented itself for her to work side by side with Barron in their senior year when the in-house championship came up. She got to see him every day since their training became scheduled for daily practice. Barron wasn't like their previous captains. He wasn't the loud, commanding type. He didn't bark out orders or demand respect from his team members. He just led by example. And that is something Sophia greatly admired in him. The day of the game finally arrived, and the school was packed with students from other high schools. This was the moment everything they had worked for came down to. The game had started, and with 2 minutes left on the clock, Barron's team was down by 2 points. The tension was suffocating. Every eye was locked on the field. Barron's teammate was with the ball, trying to dribble past an opponent to send the ball over to Barron so he could score the winning goal. He stood there watching out for his teammate, and that's when he heard her. Sophia's voice rang out loud and clear, leading the cheer team in a powerful chant that said, "Go, Barron! Go, Barron, you can do this! You were born for this!" They went on and on. Barron looked over at her, standing at the front of the cheer team, her eyes burning with absolute belief in him. Their eyes met, and something inside him clicked. He didn't wait for the ball anymore. He ran over to his teammate, collected the ball, and made it to the goalpost. Everything was sudden, and his speed was unmatched that before the opposing team could understand what was going on, Barron scored the winning goal again. Everyone stood up and cheered for him. Sophia's team was the first to rush over to the field, cheering louder than ever. Barron turned and began to use his eyes to search through the chaos for Sophia, and at that moment, he saw her running over to meet him. He caught her by the waist and effortlessly lifted her into the air as she laughed heartily, her arms wrapping around his neck. "We did it!" she gasped, her face looking directly into his. He kept looking at her, and she looked right back at him. At that moment, they knew something had changed. How they felt towards each other was no longer the same. So this was why, when Ethan was confident that Barron wouldn't take her, she told him not to get his hopes too high because she knew what she felt for him was mutual. The next day at school, Sophia told Barron everything that went on with her and Ethan, and then she went ahead and told him how she felt about him and asked him out. Barron was hesitant. He knew Ethan had liked her for a long time, though he wasn't sure how deeply. He also knew that Sophia's feelings for him were real, and he didn't want to lose out. For the first time, Barron allowed himself to choose something without overthinking it. Since then, they've been dating. Not as a power couple, not for status, but just because they liked each other and wanted to be together. Ethan was furious when he found out. It wasn't because he was rejected, but because Barron had stolen the person he loved without even trying. He watched them be together, saw the way Sophia smiled at Barron and the way Barron looked at her with admiration. And every time, it feels like a reminder of something he had lost. As he continued to watch them, Ethan felt his face burn with anger. To him, this was nothing but betrayal from someone he called his best friend, someone he had grown up with, someone he took as a brother. Ethan decided he was going to confront Barron over what he had done, and after class that day he did. He met Barron in the hallway and took him to the courtyard, where there were just the two of them. "What do you think you are doing going out with the girl you know I like?" he asked Barron, trying to guilt-trip him. Barron looked at him for a while and said, "Because she wants me, and I want her." Ethan was not expecting this response from Barron. He had expected that he would apologize and promise to leave Sophia. "Do you think you are better than me?" Ethan asked. "No, but I don't need to prove it," Barron replied coldly. He was irritated by Ethan's behavior and was trying so hard not to show it. Ethan was shattered. He no longer had anything to say to Barron. He just stared at him and said, "I will make sure you regret this." Barron didn't keep silent to his threats and told him, "I will watch you try. Let's see how much damage you can cause." Ethan walked away, leaving Barron standing alone in the courtyard. Barron was shaking. This was not his intention, but he could not watch Ethan talk down on his love for Sophia. So he had to say something, but that probably wasn't the right word. The boys drifted further apart, and before the end of high school, their friendship had turned into a cold rivalry. They still saw each other in the school hallway and sat in the same classroom, but the warmth was gone, and as far as they were concerned, they no longer existed in each other's worlds. Their parents tried to help them patch things up and told them a girl was not enough reason for them to fight, but Ethan would hear none of it and was adamant about not having anything to ever do with Barron for life. Ethan carried that resentment with him long after high school. He pursued journalism at Yale University. His aggressive reporting style earned him a reputation as a fearless voice against political hypocrisy. His career skyrocketed, landing him a primetime spot as the host of a show in one of the biggest broadcasting companies in the nation, where he dissected politicians, businessmen, and public figures with his signature wit and relentless questioning. Barron, on the other hand, remained out of the public eye. He proceeded to study international relations, and quietly, he built a name for himself through diplomacy. He avoided interviews and never involved himself in political matters. However, he was invited anonymously to a panel discussion at a prestigious university titled "The Future of Politics as a Generational Role." The event was broadcast live, attracting millions of viewers. Barron Trump decided to honor the invitation, although he was not a scheduled participant. He knew Ethan was among the event's hosts, but he decided to show up. It had been so many years since he had seen Ethan, only on the television shows he hosted, and he was curious to see how he would look up close. During the question and answer session, a student asked Ethan about political dynamics and the role of children in shaping their family's legacy. Ethan started explaining briefly, but then suddenly he cited Barron among the audience. Seizing the opportunity, he decided to make him the focal point of ridicule. "Let's talk about privilege," he said. "My friend over there," pointing to Barron Trump, "grew up in a golden power and riches. He had no struggles and never understood what it means to experience pain. He has no credentials in politics, yet media firms always reach out to him for interviews to hear what he has to say concerning a nation he knows nothing about and has zero interest in. Why? Because of his last name, Trump. All because a notable world leader bears the same surname. People believe my friend is as smart as this international figure. Hell no, it's the opposite. This is the rare privilege he enjoys, just because of his name." The crowd chuckled. Some supported the boldness of Ethan's statement. Cameras turned to Barron, taking shots of him. He remained silent, his expression unreadable. The student then turned to Barron and said, "Sir, do you have anything to say regarding this?" The moderator hesitates, unsure of whether to intervene or not. To everyone's surprise, Barron stood up and walked over to the podium. "I wasn't planning on speaking today, but since you have made me part of the discussion, let's talk," he said calmly. The noise quiets down and the stage is set for the moment no one sees coming. The tension grew intense. Barton takes the stage, standing across from Ethan. Rather than responding with anger or arrogance, he begins with an unexpected question. "Ethan, do you believe in judging people for their actions or name?" he asked. "Actions, of course," Ethan replied. "But your name," Ethan began, but Barron interrupted him. "Then let me examine yours." He turned to the audience and began. Mr. Ethan was celebrated for his journalism, yet his success didn't come without privilege. Mr. Ethan Calloway grew up in a media-connected family. Your father is a well-known editor, and your first internship was handed on a platter too. You attended a media school with all expenses covered. But here you are, mocking me for my background while ignoring your own. You paint me as entitled, yet you know nothing about my experiences, my education, or my struggles. Instead of debating ideas, you mock people. Is that real journalism, or is it just a stage performance? The audience fell into stunned silence. Ethan was caught off guard. Barron continued, his voice even but firm. You call yourself a voice for fairness, but fairness means allowing people to be more than their last name. If we truly care about breaking circles of privilege and bias, shouldn't we start by treating others with respect? A long pause followed Barron's words, and the most unexpected thing happened. Members of the audience began applauding. Ethan, known for his clever wits, searches for a clever comeback, but the weight of Barron's words lingers. Ethan forced a smirk and said, "Well, Barron, you certainly have a way with words. Seems like I underestimated you again." Barron gave a small smile and walked down the stage as the moderator closed the discussion. Media reporters scrambled to capture the moment, and the headlines were booming by the next day, stating that Barron Trump had broken the silence and shocked the nation. What do you think of Barron's response to his allegations? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Before you go, click the links on your screen for more insightful videos. You can also tap on the bell icon to get a notification when we post a new one. See you next time.